So our next presenter is Gabriel Rymberg. Gabriel Rymberg from Israel. And Gabriel is the translation chair of the Urantia Association on the International Service Board. And he's a colleague of mine, and we work together, and I can vouch for his character. He's a lovely guy. And Gabriel's presentation is called Revelation Through Translation. So Gabriel, I'll leave it up to you to introduce yourself and to let us know what you're talking about. Thank you.
Okay, so first, I'm assisted by my lovely assistant. She's going to turn the wheel of fortune, and one of you will be the lucky winner. That's Sandra, my wife. I really apologize because I made this presentation in the last 15 minutes. I wasn't scheduled to go on. So I'm filling in for somebody who's not feeling well, and I wish them good health. So we live in Israel, and 10 years ago, probably around this time, I was introduced to the Urantia book when I was traveling in Europe by somebody. He just said, "Oh, this is something you might be interested in." And I wrote it on this is the era of the internet, but still small iPhones. And I wrote the website on a piece of paper and forgot about it. And then weeks later, I found it on my wallet. And once I started reading the book, I couldn't stop. So I had a little iPhone about the size of this. And I downloaded the Urantia book on the iPhone, and I started reading and reading and reading and reading. I just couldn't stop. It was like being fed from the source, which of course it is. And after 6 months of reading, I contacted the foundation, the Urantia Foundation, and I just felt called to ask them if they are interested in having a Hebrew translation. And up until that point, I wasn't translating anything. I was doing computer science and programming and doing other things. And well, to make a long story short, it took about a year for them to decide that I am okay to do this. And it took about a year for me to decide that I'm okay doing this. And so in 2011, I started talking with the foundation, and in 2012, I started the translation. So this presentation is to tell you a little bit behind the scenes of what it is to translate the Urantia book. We're still working on it. We're almost done with a revision, which I will explain in a minute what it is. But this is a 10-year project, and I'll just share with you a little bit about what it is to do something like this, what's behind the scenes, who is involved, how we do this. If you want to ask questions, since this is a very short presentation, we're going to have a little bit of me talking and sharing, and then Sandra is going to do a little bit of worship meditation, and then I will share with you something that I call spiritual translations, which is a new venture, and perhaps this is a good time to put it out in our community so that whoever is interested in joining us has the chance to do so. So I made a little presentation. My company name is called QLingua. It's a translation company. So if you see the logo at the bottom, it's what it is. I'm just using my own templates. So obviously this is teamwork, and I just start with a quote. One of the most important lessons to be learned during your mortal career is teamwork. The spheres of perfection are manned by those who have mastered this art of working with other beings. Few are the duties in the universe for the lone servant. And this is very, very true. I couldn't count the number of words in the Urantia book. I know I have a PDF, but I don't have it in Word format. I know it's more than 1 million words. It's very long, as you all know. It took us tens of thousands of work hours. This is the human hours. I'm not talking about all the other beings who were helping. 2,097 pages. 1,044 specific terms, and I will explain what those are and what we did with them. It's about 10 years of work in duration. We were 3 humans and many non-human team members who helped us to do this translation of one single book. So I just want to say in parentheses that this project has been managed by the Urantia Foundation, by Georges, Michael Dupont, and who's been the translation chair of the foundation for many years, and Marilyn Kulicki, Tamara Stromfeld. And the foundation has synthesized its long-term experience in translations. I think Mo said we're in the 22nd, 23rd, 24th language. So this is a very long process that started with the publication of the Urantia book and has been going on for 60 years already or more. Many people involved, and the lessons learned are quite a lot. So I'm just going to present this little snippet from a document, a long and elaborate document that explains the process that was handed to me by Georges before I started. And I actually did build our team according to this guideline. So we were 3 people, myself, the chief translator, a perfect bilingual individual. I'm not really bilingual perfectly in English. I lived many years in the United States and in Canada, and I was working there in English and studying and writing and reading. So I can say I'm 95% bilingual. I'm not as a real bilingual, but it's pretty close. So I did write the first draft, and I did spend many, many hours. I was supported by the foundation, but I also had to invest many, many hours in this effort. Then we had a copy editor, and this person is, his name is Gabriel, Hebrew, and very gifted with words, very gifted with words. He didn't read the Urantia book before he started working on this. So he was reading it as he was going along. But of course, he was reading every paper I was translating. And I'd like to say that I was writing an 80 to 85%. If I mark my own work, I would give that the translation that mark, 80, 85. I think it's a fair assessment. I'm not objective, but I would do that. And then he would get it to the point where it's 90 or 95%. And we actually had, during our work, an external translation company evaluated our work, and they gave us an A mark, which is quite high. And now, in hindsight, now that I've been doing translations professionally for the last 10 years, I can tell that this is a very good process and a good composition of a team. So Yechezkel copy edits every paper that I write. Then we had a third person, Avi Dogim, who is already graduated. He graduated last year, but he was working with us for the last 10 years, and he's a long-time reader. His mother tongue is not English, but he was living in the United States for 40 years. He was born in Israel. And of course, he had quite good Hebrew and very good English, living in the States for many, many years. So he was helping us catch those little nuances that were missing as a long-time reader. So that was our team. Avi is no longer with us, but Yechezkel is now working on the last few papers. Well, he's scheduled to finish his copy editing by the end of December this year. So he's on paper 196 or 195 or something like that. And here's the process that we use. First of all, before I could start translating, I had to read the book twice, cover to cover. So when I was given the book, I started with a foreword, and I did not understand anything. So I went back to the person who gave it to me and said, "What is this?" He says, "Go to part 4, go to part 4." So I did. So I started reading, about Jesus's life. And then I read the entire part 4. And when I finished part 4, I started back reading from the beginning. And only then I contacted the foundation. And then George and Tamara said, you have to read it twice before you can start translating. So I spent about a year finishing my first reading and then rereading the book just by reading as much as I could every day. And that process took about a year, and I think it's a year well spent. I wasn't a student of the Urantia book before then. I was really only then starting to read it. So, and of course I didn't remember anything by the time I finished the first reading. The second reading was as if it was the first, because I was just reading very quickly. At the same time, I was basically asking for the team to be formed. And actually, Yechezkel arrived much later in the process. I was already starting to translate, and I wasn't sure who's going to be my copy editor. So he started about a year after me, and I was going quite fast. So I finished the first draft by the end of 2017. It took me about 5 years to do that. But he was going at a slower speed. That's why he's still copy editing. Avi started from the beginning. Actually, Avi was the first person who read my translations. The foundation asked me to select 2 papers and translate them. And then they sent them to Avi. Avi revised them. Okay, so that was our team. Then we had the foundation devised a list of, I added to it, but it was over 1,000 entries. We call this the list of specific terms. And it is proper names, but all those special words. You know, how do you translate Absonite to another language? Or agodonter, or, you know, Salvington, Nuversa, Satania. So there are proper names that you have to decide if you translate or transliterate. Transliterate means write the same name in your language. So I would write the word Salvington in Hebrew characters, and then a person who reads Hebrew would read Salvington, and I would mark it with the vocalization so that they know what they're reading. But Absonite, I had to basically make a new word because, in my opinion, I mean, we don't really know, but Absonite is not an English word, and the best that I could understand it is that it was an amalgamated word from absolute and finite. So I just did the same trick in Hebrew, and I came with the word muchlatofi, which means exactly the same thing. So if I'm right with my interpretation, then that choice of word is correct. And I had to do this for over 1,000 entries. So that process alone took about 3 months. And I did all of that before I started to translate the first paper. Then there was another thing that I decided to do in the beginning, which saved me a lot of time. There is a book called The Paramony by, well, I don't remember, but it was one of our brothers who very early on, probably 30 or 40 years ago, decided to write, to basically collect all the quotes from the Bible, the Old and the New Testament, and mark them. Basically say, where is this quote from? And then write by quote all the papers in which it appears, and vice versa. You can go into the Paramony book and go to paper 147, for example, and you will have a table with all of the places where the author of the Paramony said, I think this is a quote from the Old Testament or the New Testament, and it will write the text and it will tell you where in the New Testament, which book and which chapter and which verse, the Old or the New Testament. So that was very helpful. I had one person, her name was Lirit. She was a friend of mine from the yoga school. She spent hundreds of hours going through each paper in the Urantia book that has those quotes. And then she actually extracted the text for me in a form of an Excel sheet. So by the time I got to paper 147 to translate, I didn't have to go and actually look for it in the Old Testament or New Testament, which would be a very time-consuming step. So I already had somebody that do it for me. And then when I reached a quote, with somebody probably usually Jesus says something that was obviously a quote from the Old or the New Testament. You know, the New Testament, that's funny because this is his words, but then later written. But obviously it appears in the Old Testament somewhere. Then I would take the text of a Hebrew translation of the New Testament that I selected, and of course the original text of the Bible, which is in Hebrew, the Old Testament, and use that to write the translation. Sometimes the quote was verbatim. If Jesus was quoting from the Old Testament, then I would put the words from the Old Testament. But if he was actually quoting and paraphrasing, then I will use the original words and then change here and there, because sometimes he said some things which were quoted, like he said them, the master, but he was paraphrasing the Old Testament. And of course, when somebody wrote the New Testament, they wrote whatever they remembered, and it wasn't necessarily word by word what the master said. It was pretty close sometimes. So this single step saved me probably hundreds of hours, because part 4 has a lot of quotes, and it was also done in parallel. So I was translating the first parts while she was doing this. So by the time I got to the 4th part, this was already done for me, and it saved me a lot of time. The translation process has still 3 steps. Myself writing a first draft, then I will send it to Avi, and Avi will read it, and I will talk a little bit about technology in a minute, but Avi will read it and mark it, and then he will return it to me and Yechezkel, and we will discuss it. Most of the time the discussions were very quick, very short, and then we'll finalize our comments. And then Yechezkel will take that finalized version and actually copy edit it using track changes in Word. And then I will take the original that I wrote and the version that Yechezkel copy edited, and I will actually read everything and say, okay, I like this, I take it, I don't like it, I don't take it. And then it was my final decision to produce the second draft, which basically is the one that is going to be printed. So this is a good time for me to stop and answer any questions you might have about this process, if you do. I think you can unmute yourself, Andre.
Oh, yeah, I am. Gabriel, the word when you do such a work is patience need to be very important. Eh? On the long run, 10 years and more to translate.
Well, I will speak a little bit about the help. This brings tears to my eyes because it's true. I was deliberating for 2 weeks before I actually signed the contract with the foundation, because I did. And I was basically asking for guidance. You know, I knew this would be something that would probably be one of the most important things I would do in my life. And I needed the support, the financial support, the moral support, and basically the understanding that if I start this, I really have to finish. I cannot leave this in the middle. And by personality, I like to start many things. I have a lot of ideas, and sometimes I don't finish. I'm a good starter. I can come up with an idea and the vision and the plan, but then in the execution, it just goes, other people really have to take over. And this is well, I think I prayed to be helped, and basically I just did it one day at a time. There were many years where I had to do other work to sustain myself. And there was, and then the Father provided me with one particular freelancing gig that paid a lot of money. So I took a year off and I spent that year translating and playing the piano, basically, pretty much all day long. So from the morning I had my practice, and then I sat down and I translated for several hours, and I played, and it was very happy for me. I was very happy. I had a little house, and so I guess one day at a time, and I knew I'm going to finish, and I was tremendously helped by our Father and our Master and all the unseen friends that brought the right people, the right opportunities, the right ideas to my life so that I could complete this. And of course, my team members, Avi, who's already graduated, and Yecheskel, that he's wonderful. He really is gifted with words to a point. When I read his text, I say, I write some prose, and he makes it like a Beethoven symphony. He puts the extra beauty into it. So I'm really very blessed to have these two people working alongside, and all the others who are unseen that were helping.
Merci, Gabriel.
Thank you, Andre. Stuart.
Yeah, Gabriel, I am so glad to meet you. Now I know why. It's 3:30 in the morning, and my angel said, stick around, because you need to say hello to Mr. Gabriel Rymberg. I think this is incredible what you're doing. I'm going to assume we're talking about the Hebrew translation. And I am very much involved with the process of translation in my history. I respect the methodology to do a proper translation. For instance, the Christian Bible was translated into many versions. The one that I like the most, because I appreciate the scholarship, is the New International Version of it. But I have read other versions to see how they differ and where they put their emphasis on. Avi Dogin, I have known this wonderful, maybe one of the warmest natural men of honor that I have ever met for at least 30 years of my life, and until recently when he passed. It is a great loss, and I know your loss of it because I lose a friend too. I lose those moments of connection with this really admirable man. I want you to know that for 4.5 years, recently, until fairly recently, I was involved with the Urantia Society of the Greater New York Society, where Avi and Leela and the Deinstats and the Dryers, and huge amount of wisdom up there. I had the exposure of all of that for a good 4.5 years. I was even 2 years the secretary for the society. I got to know Mr. Dogin. This man was quiet. He did not focus on himself, but he had a constant stability of awareness that was a fresh air every time you had a chance to meet with him. I cannot remember one moment of my passing by Avi and saying how much I appreciate who you are as a brother in God's kingdom. So he is. And I just want to say right now, do you know that I have been spending the past 3 years, I'm part of the Translation Oversight Committee of the Urantia Society of Greater New York, with Leela Dagim right now very much involved, and we have different projects. I have been involved with a gentleman, Angel Francisco Escobar, for 3 years to help him out with the terminology of the Urantia book into Spanish, because I have years of some experience with Spanish to work with him. And I love translations. I just want to say, Gabriel, I'm sorry I took a little longer than I wanted to, but I just want to thank you for your service. And I heard tonight your sincere dedication to bring the greatest translation that can enlighten all the speaking people of Hebrew that you are bringing this to. I pray for you, good sir.
Thank you. Verona, you wanted to say something?
Hello there. That was wonderful, that presentation. Absolutely great.
If anybody has a question, they can unmute themselves, and because we don't see everybody at the same time.
Yeah, this is Collins. Hey,
Hi, Collins.
hey, how you doing? All right. Okay. So, are you involved in the in translation of in translation into other languages, or you just worked on the Hebrew translation?
With the Urantia book, just Hebrew. But after the questions, Sandra is going to do a little bit of worship, and then I will present with you something else that I want to share today with you, to invite whoever is interested to join this. So in that project, we will do other languages and other spiritual works. But yeah, with the Urantia book, I read Spanish. I was born in Argentina, so I used some of the Spanish translation as reference, but I couldn't translate into Spanish. I don't have that language. So no, just Hebrew.
All right, thanks.
May I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Aloha, I'm from Honolulu, Hawaii, and I actually worked for an Israeli person that was born in Tel Aviv, and I lived and worked with him for 35 years. My question to you is, being that the Hebrew background and the Old Testament and the Torah and the Kabbalah has, to me, great conflict in the genesis and the inheritance of how Urantia groups and races have developed throughout the Urantia. And I wanted to ask you, there's a lot of conflict there, and when you interpreted those sections of Urantia, did you have any pull towards the background you had in learning the Torah, which is really essentially the Old Testament? Because really, when you hit the Jesus section, that really is not part of the Hebrew or Jewish belief.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I don't know if you know Diane Labrec. She's a great friend of mine, beautiful sister, and she gifted me with a poster of Jesus. If you go to my Instagram account, you will see myself taking a picture with the Urantia book, and in the back there is what Diane says is a picture of Jesus. And she left this roll up in my room, and I had basically the master with me in the room while I was working for all those years. And as a Jewish person who only at the age of maybe 40 or 35 entered the church for the first time, I had to overcome a lot of conditioning, the collective conditioning of the Jews, to basically allow myself to open myself to have a relationship with our brother, father, master, friend, And it, for me, it first started intellectually, and then it went down into the heart, to the point where first I understood who he was, who he is, and what he came here to do. And then I think I understood my role, without taking personal credit, as somebody who is going to give the Urantia book to my brothers and sisters to read Hebrew and let them decide for themselves what relationship they want with the person, the being who actually created this universe. And if somebody wants to read the Urantia book, they should be able to do it in their own mother tongue. That's my personal opinion. That's why I did this work. So I did have to overcome a lot of conditioning, but when I was working, I put all that aside. And I think it was a wise decision. I wasn't thinking if what I'm translating is true or false, if it's accurate. I was just doing it as a work of translation. And I also must be frank and say that some of the concepts, more advanced spiritual concepts, I still don't understand them. Like many of us, we face, especially those papers about the Trinity and Trinitization and eventualization and, well, and the forward, of course. So I just did my best. I asked for guidance and I did my best to put in words however they should be put, even though I don't understand in my mind the concept. And this can be sometimes amazing to understand, but although I was writing this translation, I wasn't really writing this translation alone. There were things working through me, and I guess the same process it was used just to put aside my personal condition as a small person who was happened to be called Gabriel and born Jewish and had this conditioning of the Jewish people. So I just tried to put all this aside and just let the work flow through my human hands, through my physical computer, but just be a channel. And that was my prayer. And I hope it just, it worked as much as possible with my human limitations.
The reason I'm asking you that is because Hebrew people, and I also went to J.J. Hurtak studies, and I've been studying at the house of Terry and Kit Duray up in Kailua, Hawaii, on Oahu. And I see Kit is off right now. But see, when I was also reading the Dead Sea Scrolls and studying the Hebrew language, embedded within the Hebrew language, which is one of 7 sacred languages that resonates by sound and not necessarily by translation verbatim of semantic interpretation, and not necessarily the root meaning of what sacred languages, such as the root meaning semantically of Hebrew or of the sacred languages such as, other type of sacred languages, but you're one of them in Hebrew. So, because there are coded messages within the Hebrew language, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and within the Hebrew written scrolls, to me, trying to interpret Urantia vocabulary, which is like PhD level. I mean, we sat in Urantia reading groups and read paragraphs 5 times and still didn't understand what the vocabulary words really meant. So I wanted to ask you, when you translate professionally, are you looking at root causes, root languages, whether it's in Latin or Hebrew or the sacred languages, or are you looking for certain codes or semantics, or how are you interpreting some of the very difficult vocabulary in Urantia?
The short answer to your question is I'm not versed in Kabbalah. I mean, I know of Kabbalah. My spiritual path before the Urantia book came into my life was different. I wasn't even practicing the mystical arts of Judaism. I was practical. I mean, I am trained as a yoga teacher, and I went into various types of meditation. And I did all that before the Urantia book came into my life. So I guess I had a different kind of training, a different kind of spiritual path. And to me, I just it wasn't part of my conditioning, so I wasn't looking for any coded messages. I was just taking this as a translation project, of course, understanding that this is a very special book, but just in a sense, to the best of my ability, letting go of anything and just letting the words flow. And this doesn't sound very professional, but after I did all the professional preparation that I described to you, I thought that this would be the best way to let this translation manifest through this person. I have perfect command of Hebrew. I was raised in Israel. I grew up here. I'm a very good writer. So, and that's what you require to be a translator. You have to be able to write, express yourself in your mother tongue. And so after all these prerequisites were met, I think, I just opened myself and let the translation flow. And then of course I would reread every paragraph or every section I wrote, and if I needed to fix it, I would fix it. But I would write like this. And then I knew there would be 2 other people reading after me with different types of attention to detail. So yeah, so the short answer was this is in a sense a mystical process, but I wasn't being aware that this is a mystical process, and I just let go and let the process do whatever it would do.
Gabriel.
Yeah.
You may have addressed this before, but I missed a few things. Is there, for translators, is there like a definition of terms? So, you know, the difficult concepts in the Urantia book, has any, like George or any of the team preceding you have put together some sort of definition of terms to help the translators?
Yeah, there is a glossary, and I had it. And I think the foundation is now working on a new enhanced ebook that will have that glossary as part of it. I did use that glossary from time to time. And as I said, I had to go through the list of specific terms and many of those difficult terms and create Hebrew words for them. During that process, I used the glossary extensively, and then I just consulted my own list. And when I hit a difficult paragraph, I would just go back and read the glossary again.
Okay, thank you.
Gabriel,
Yes.
do you have a book printed already that we could look at, and are you expected to make the translations 2,097 pages like the English?
The short answer to that is you can go to the foundation's website. You can go to Barry Clark's website, and the text of the Urantia Hebrew translation is both in those in digital form. I don't think we will print a Hebrew translation in the near future. If we do, I'm not sure it's going to be, without a major effort, be able to keep the same paging number, because Hebrew is much shorter. When you go from English to Hebrew, the number of words is reduced by 20, 30, sometimes even 40%. So the text is much shorter. Hebrew has different inflections, and it's not as rich as English, actually. English is richer as a language, I think, in my opinion, but it is more concise. So if we ever print the Hebrew translation, one of the first decisions would have to be, do we keep it in the same numbers, or we just let go and just keep the paper section paragraph, but just keep different numbers? I'm not sure about that. Ken raised his hand. So Ken, if it doesn't work, if you want to type your question, I will. Yeah, the Paramonies by Dwayne Fall. Thank you. I can read your comment. And 1,120,913 words. Ken is asking if I use the Hebrew calendar, and the answer is no, but I'm also not sure exactly what for. I did have to say that we, the foundation has prepared also a list of all the measurements, which are in the non-metric, and then I converted them to metric. So all the miles and kilograms and meters and feet and all those were converted to metric because that was the decision made. So we did that as well. And Vanderlei is asking where exactly can I raise my hand? You can just ask a question, and just if you can try to unmute yourself, Vanderlei.
Hey, how are you? Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, so thank you. Let me ask you a question. I was very passionate, before reading the Urantia book by the writings of the Bible. And I came across a book that is called the Book of Urantia. It's Cracking the Bible Code. That it says something very interesting about the secret and hidden codes behind the writings that we found in the Bible, even in the Old Testament, in the Torah, in the prophets, and in the New Testament. And by the first time that I came across the Urantia book, I was trying to reconciliate. Oh, let me finish. And then through the Bible code, that is something very academic, very defended by scholars, especially mathematicians and statisticians. There is a book, a classical book called Cracking the Bible Code, that it tells the whole story, and there is a couple of documentaries all over the YouTube, where you can find this information. And then my question about related to the Urantia book is how exactly is possible to see if there is a kind of hidden code behind the Urantia book, because it is the test actually was given by celestial beings, and the hidden codes that we have behind in the Bible, using the Hebrew and the geometry that we have behind the Hebrew language, leads us to a very spectacular mathematical. Well, it's a kind of interesting stuff to give it more authority if it is needed. I don't think that we needed that actually, but it gives you more authority that this writing is supernatural, or that there was supernatural beings behind the writings of the Urantia book. Well, as you said, like when I talk about geometry, do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, I understand, but I think I'm not well equipped to answer this question. I really not familiar with the concept, and I didn't watch those videos, so I don't have anything intelligent to say about this.
I see. Good. Would you mind if I share with you later in a private?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
I'd love to.
Because it's even though my English is not very good, I'm Brazilian, and I use French most as a language because I was living in France, but my English is not that okay. And actually, it's almost 5 o'clock in the morning here, so it's very early. I wake up in order to be with you and watching your presentation. But what I want to tell you is that we have such a wonderful tool in the Bible in order to understand that there was, in some case, some in the Torah actually, that were, how can I say, signed, you know, by celestial beings. And I am sure that even though we don't have any way to measure this right now, that we might have something similar in the Urantia book that we will understand it later, because of the code behind the Torah and the Hebrew language was only possible to discover, to be researched after the computer advent, after a program be developed and be able and make it easier to people to understand exactly the code that we have behind the language. That is something spectacular and marvelous that make us like a wow. This is really something that was not given by humans. It was given by something else. That's it. So thank you, man.
Thank you. I'd like to share with you something that I'm working on right now, and because I've been praying to our Father to send us the right people, and perhaps one of you is going to be interested or know somebody else who's interested. So this is called spiritual translations, and this would be basically the rationale, the why. I call this to spread spiritual teachings. And this is something that Jesus said. If you love your fellow men, you must have discovered their values. Oh, actually, it's not Jesus said. Jesus loved men so much because he placed such a high value upon them. You can best discover values in your associates by discovering their motivation. So he says, if once you understand your neighbor, you will become tolerant, and this tolerance will grow into friendship and ripen into love. What I want to do is establish, I call this a platform because I don't really have a good name for it. But I'd like to be able to help people that write spiritual works. And this could be secondary Urantia book related works, but any other type of spiritual work, be it in video form, in audio form, in written form, in any of the new technology forms that has language in it, spread out to other people. Because in my opinion, part of our spirit uniformity or spirit unity is going to be accomplished by understanding our brothers and sisters from other traditions. So if, for example, somebody in Germany writes a beautiful book about Islam that explains some of the most intricate parts of the Muslim faith, and I'd like to be able to help this person reach the audience in the English world and maybe in the Arabic world, and share this work of spirit with the world. So because I explained to you that a spiritual translation is a very specific thing, it takes a very detailed process and it takes attention to detail. I'd like to be able to bring people together that have these skills and bring the people who really would like these services to be given into one place where they can meet each other and basically do things together with the aim of spreading spiritual teachings, anything that is worthwhile. And there is no censorship here. There's still room for all the traditions. We still have many languages. We still have many religions. And the spirit will be to let ourselves know our brothers and sisters so that we can really understand them. And like the master said, love them. And this will be a little step that we can do today towards the light and life that we all know one day will reach this planet. So if any of you is interested in learning more about this, there's an ideation team being formed right now of people that are interested in this project, with some Urantia book readers, some non-Urantia book readers. So we plan to do this in a professional way. And this is a business, but it's going to be a business that is going to be a new type of business, not really run for in the same way that our normal business work looks. So if you're interested in,
I've still got 20 minutes to cook.
yeah, if you're interested in more details, please approach me, and I'll be happy to share. So with that, I'm done, and we can have 2 minutes.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. That was really, really interesting, very informative. I never cease to be amazed at the work that these translators have done and what a huge effort it is. And you'll go down history as being one of the heroes of the revelation, I'm sure. So thank you.